Poppy Playtime's story behind its living toys is far more sinister and tragic than previously thought. We've all seen the many horror games that seem to be plentiful nowadays, full of heartless monsters, but sometimes you realize that the monster is not the true villain and is actually just a victim. Poppy Playtime is the story of one man's quest to resurrect his dead child using the apparent supernatural effects of the poppy flower. In the game's first tape, we discover that in the 1960s, the creator and owner of Playtime Co, Elliot Ludwig, and his wife suffered a tragic loss that led to their divorce, as the tape says,
"Divorced, but a family man at heart. Ludwig spent countless hours in the factory, working overtime relentlessly in an attempt to continuously innovate and surprise. In the 1960s, an unfortunate family death had pushed Ludwig down to his lowest.
We can only assume that this loss was of Elliot's daughter, and thus Elliot began turning his toy factory into something else, as he began experimenting with poppy flowers in an effort to somehow bring his dead child back to life with no expense being spared. Thanks to the dirty NFTs that Mob Games released, we know that Playtime Co had already released their first successful toy, being Poppy Playtime herself in 1950. And sometime after Braun's release in 1961, Elliot's daughter passed, and he was able to transfer her consciousness into a toy, being none other than Poppy Playtime herself. And most likely this happened after Elliot began testing the reanimation properties of the poppy flower on rats, and then, as we saw in Chapter 2's game station, orphans. The game's first note found in Elliot's office reads, "Experiment 814. This experiment utilized a live rat. Rat was fed 3 portions daily for 2 weeks. At the end of the 2 weeks, the rat was killed and submerged into a poppy flower and preservative gel mixture. A week later, an electric shock was applied to the rat, still in the gel, in an attempt to revive it. The rat remained unresponsive. Analysis. I still believe in the potential of the poppy flower. Its unusual properties lead me to believe that the proper mixture and procedure could have life-altering properties. The poppy flower has for a long time carried heavy symbolism, and I don't believe that's for no reason. Perhaps something larger than a rat would yield different results." So Elliot began testing his poppy flower gel mixture on orphans with enough success to allow his daughter to be reanimated as Playtime Co's first successful human toy hybrid, Poppy Playtime, who we find in what could very well be a recreation of what was once her childhood home. That's right down the hall from Elliot Ludwig's office. But things didn't stop there. Through wanting his daughter fully back in the flesh, and Playtime Co from having discovered a goldmine of untold amounts, Elliot and Playtime Co decided to take these experiments much further. And in note 5 we read, "Warren Bach Construction Company." This is Eddie responding once again on behalf of the Playtime Co toy factory. Yes, it must be in complete secrecy. This project should only be known about by those with the authority at Warren Bach and those with the authority here at Playtime. As promised, you will be compensated very well for the secrecy. Upwards of 100,000, keeping in mind that this is a ballpark figure. We're willing to provide the proper equipment needed for excavation. However, the more independently you are able to work, the more compensation I can offer. We'd still like to see the lab completed in 12 months' time, but what's most important is that it's done right. Let me know if these terms work for you. I'm happy to negotiate until we find something that both parties can be happy with. Then, to boost the company's revenue, a public announcement was made where they announced they had created the world's first intelligent doll. And to really hit the profit nail on the head, not only did they turn the orphans into the smaller toys we see lying around the factory, but as seen through Chapter 2's game station, they specifically tested orphans to see who they would turn into the company's driving mascots. It also seems that the company's general employees had no idea about the factory or the larger living toys, as in a tape with employee Marcus Brickley, played by Jacksepticeye, he seems shaken after seeing something roaming the halls at night, possibly being Mommy Longlegs or Experiment 1006. But there was just one major problem. Nearly every toy and child they reanimated, save for Poppy and seemingly Kissy Missy, was incredibly violent. Poppy was previously thought to be employee Stella Grayber, an employee that seemed incredibly excited and open to being turned into a toy, and at least on board with all the unethical child child experiments, who we now know was in charge of overseeing the children's testing at the game station years after Poppy's creation. Note 8 found in the game station's control room reads, proctoring in the game station. Instructions: start by reporting to the control station. Always keep a minimum distance of 20 yards away from Mommy Longlegs. The train will arrive with the children at 8 a.m. All children will be gathered within the game station all at once. The order of the games will be musical memory, Huggy Wuggy, then statues. A series of bridges and doors from the control station should guide you to each game. Mommy Longlegs can assist in guiding children to each game. Only one child should ever play a game at a time. Children who are not playing a game will wait in the game station. There is playground equipment to keep them entertained. Record each child's performance as it is relevant to each game. Musical memory, composure, memory, pattern recognition, Huggy Wuggy, hand-eye coordination, reaction time, statues, agility, strength, speed. Once the children have left for the day, return to the control station. Give all reports to Miss Stella Graybird to sort through. Whether Stella Graybird was eventually voluntarily turned into Kissy Missy and thus rendered Kissy Missy as friendly towards others is unknown. However, we do know that Playtime Co was creating the toys to be obedient to their or someone's orders. As in the 7th and final tape, we are told that
Experiment 1170, Huggy Wuggy, remains the optimal outcome due to his sufficient intelligence paired with maximum obedience.
This may explain why Huggy Wuggy didn't attack us on sight when first entering the factory in Chapter 1, as someone or something is still alive in the factory who gave him the order to not attack until later. Someone that may have known that we were coming. And speaking of Huggy Wuggy, it seems like we may not be done with him due to the blue fur caked with blood that we find on a nearby pipe and the walls behind it. And speaking of obedient toys, what about the chapter's protagonist, Mommy Longlegs? Well, it seems that she was used by Playtime Co to help move the kids in the game station. The game's notes show a much more hidden story going on behind the scenes. While note number 5 shows that the employees had to keep a minimum of 20 yards away from her at all times, another note found in the water treatment plant says, transfer request, experiment 1222, Mommy Longlegs, subject Marie Payne. Abilities: Mommy Longlegs has a unique ability to stretch any of her limbs for several hundred feet. This includes her fingers, arms, her neck, waist, and legs. She's very hostile towards the staff, but is very motherly and acts warmly towards the other experiments. She is protective of them. Problem: the hostility is quickly becoming problematic, but perhaps there's a solution to put her in her place. Proposal: Mommy Longlegs would be perfect for facilitating everything with the children in the game station. She has a warmth that a mother should, and any rowdy child can learn to listen to their mother. It makes sense that her seeing these children daily would improve her behavior, and it is very unlikely she will act out in front of the children. Have her transferred to high security maintenance immediately. Conditioning can begin. Showing that while Mommy Longlegs was used by the company, she was hostile towards the staff and remained protective of the orphans they were experimenting on, all the way through to them being turned into toys themselves. But Mommy Longlegs went to far greater lengths to protect the kids than the scientists may have known, at least right away. At the end of the statue game, where you're chased by PJ Pugapillar and end up crashing into an office, you can find 2 game station test subject assessment forms. While both assessment forms depict the performance of orphan Michaela Hyssop, who was assigned as a potential candidate for Candy Cat, they show that Michaela was struggling during the statue's minigame and seemingly was receiving help to improve her score. Both notes are also mysteriously cut off at the end before the game's proctor could finish writing it, showing that they were most likely killed by whoever was helping Michaela before they could report her subpar score. From these notes, we can see that Mommy Longlegs and possibly others of the main toys are protective of each other, or at least are on good terms with one another, except for one, being Experiment 1006, the prototype, which ties into why Poppy doesn't allow us to escape the factory at the chapter's end, saying that,
"You're perfect. Too perfect to lose. I'm sorry. I can't let you leave."
I love seeing when people and even monsters try to do the right thing despite the cost, rather than being greedy, self-serving villains, which brings us to why Poppy would force us to remain in the factory after she was seemingly trying to help us escape. From her quote,
"We'll set things right. terrible things have happened.
Poppy seems to be on her own quest to save the other toys and stop whatever evil the scientists created. The same evil that had Mommy Longlegs crying out in fear, being Experiment 1006. Again, in the game's 7th and final tape, we hear the scientists speak of an issue.
Experiment 1006. A close call occurred this week in which he nearly breached containment. The prototype seemingly disassembled the digital alarm clock within his room to create a laser pointer, which he then fired into the security camera, disabling it. Once function returned to the camera, the room appeared to be empty. One surveillance specialist went in to confirm his absence. However, upon opening the door, she realized that the prototype had hidden in one of the camera's blind spots. The prototype attempted to escape through the open door. However, another surveillance specialist was able to remotely relock the door, despite the other specialists still being inside. One casualty occurred. The prototype seems to possess an unprecedented level of intelligence, beyond that of all other test subjects, as well as an alarming willingness to commit violence.
And we can see that the experiment possibly used her for parts to further construct or modify itself. And it's this violent monster mentioned in chapters 1 and 2 that has all the other toys afraid for their lives, seeming to literally be building up to be the game's main antagonist and serves as the primary motive for Poppy to keep us in the factory. But if none of this was very interesting, then I saved a really cool piece of evidence for last. When we see Huggy Wuggy's trail of blue fur and blood from where he landed after the first chapter, we find that the trail stops at a vent, possibly indicating that 1006 dragged Huggy through the vent to graft Huggy onto itself as another dark secret hidden in the game. As in the next video, we solve the theory of what Experiment 1006 really is. And next time you subscribe to our channel, I hope you think of me.